I hope that you take a look at the manifold prediction markets. If you go in the panel chat on WhatsApp, you have them all laid out according to this track. And I would love to start the first track with a quote, actually, from Engines of Creation, just to kind of like set the pace in terms of some of the more ambitious versions of this field. But it's when, which will be the last generation to age and die, and which will be the first to win through. Obviously, not everyone wants to live all the way, but I think it can just set the upper bound of like what we could possibly be striving for. Now, I'm really, really happy to have such wonderful panelists here. Maybe I'll start from here. We have Sam over here, who I met, well, at the last Vision Weekend, but also at Burning Man. We have Joe. Thank you so much for the wonderful retro tour yesterday. It was absolutely a pleasure. We have Emil here from Tomorrow Bio, who's really like, kickstarting the Cryonics industry a little bit. And we have Vittorio, who's been like a wonderful collaborator. We've had you, I think, for several virtual seminars already. So thank you so much for joining. Sonia is on our board, and she is doing 100 Plus as well, and wrote a fantastic book about the societal implications of longevity. We have Reason here, who is leading our longevity, our personal strategy session, has the blog Fight Aging, and a really interesting company. And then finally, Vadim, thank you so much for joining. You have another event, a big one coming up in the next week at the BAC, so thanks a lot for making it out here, and it's a really big pleasure to collaborate with you in the Biomarkers of Aging Consortium. Okay, let's hit the road. First question is, for anyone who wants to give like a brief overview of like what changed in longevity in the past 5 years, because I think a lot has changed, but then also where do you think, and this can literally be like around in a circle, what do you think is the number one thing that you're working on, and how could it impact the longevity space positively in the next 5 years? So really like, what is the one thing that you think you're really bullish about, and if you work on it, that's great too. Do you want to kick us off?
No, my opinion is that in the last 5 years, the major advances in the longevity space have involved biomarkers of aging. So we previously couldn't quantify biological age. Now we can. We still don't understand exactly what's the best way to do it, but it's been a major advance, I would say, revolution. And the second advance has been the potential for rejuvenation. So there's really been several examples when biological age could be reduced, maybe not for the whole organism, maybe partially, maybe in cell culture or some kind of artificial animal models, but at least it's possible now.
I think when you're in an accelerating curve up, it always looks like, hey, a lot happened recently, and that's true wherever you are in the but things weren't happening before that. Same true wherever you are. We'll look back on the last 5 years, say 15 years from now, and think, wow, the first 20 years of this century, not a lot happened. But when you're standing right here, I think the money is probably the most interesting thing. It's also the most boring thing, but it tends to drive the interesting things. Of course, Altos Labs got an enormous, stupendous, silly amount of money, $3 billion. And that was a sizable fraction of all biotech funding in that year. So suddenly the upward curve is going upward quite fast. And once this market downturn is done, I'm sure people like Joe over here will be doing their best to make the next large number even larger. So that's interesting and boring.
Right. Reason, you set me up perfectly for that, because I was going to say, so I spend my time investing in early stage biotech and longevity companies. And so the last 5 years for me, it has been about the money, I guess, because there's been a lot of different new investors in the field. And we saw a lot of people from crypto coming in and funding biotech companies. And then we saw them leave and start funding AI companies. And sometimes those two companies are together. But there's been churn, I think, in the investor space, and new types of investors. So like Amazon and or Jeff Bezos, and lots of different types of people who are funding biotech things that might not have been doing it before. But then, of course, there's also the regular investors. So that's kind of some of the change that I've seen. Obviously, a lot of scientific change. And then, did you want us to answer the other question too? I mean, I feel like there were a lot of questions there in terms of like, what are we doing that that might have an impact. So, for me, obviously, the companies that I'm investing in could have a huge impact on the world, and that's why I do what I do. So, like AI for diagnostics, gene therapy, various nanotech things. I mean, so there's a lot of cool things going on, which a lot of you know about. And then the other thing that I'm doing is I'm involved with a 501c4, which is a lobby group called the Alliance for Longevity Initiatives, and we're trying to make the climate for longevity and biotech companies better at the federal and at the government level. So better regulatory pathways, maybe trying to help organize some of the biomarker stuff once that gets further along, increasing funding for longevity companies and all that kind of thing. So if anyone's interested, you should check us out at a4li.org. Oh, you have one.
Well, to answer your first question, Allison, a lot has happened, really a lot. I guess from a scientific standpoint, as Vadim mentioned, I think really exciting the fact that there's a lot of people now that are really thinking about developing tools to measure aging, but most importantly to measure rejuvenative interventions, which I think it's a slightly different question that needs a lot of attention. Obviously, also I've seen the development and the implementation already of technologies, for example, senolytics, and metformin or other types of drugs that are really now getting into clinical trials that I think are going to really revolutionize the way we think about the whole problem. So that's kind of academically scientific, and of course partial reprogramming, which is my love, which I will address in the second part of the question. But I think what's really exciting to see, in addition to what has been said, like the VCs are putting a lot of attention. I think that globally there is really a lot of awareness about the fact that really aging and aging-associated conditions is really something that we need to start thinking about seriously, because this is going really to impact sooner or later our lives. And I find particularly exciting the fact that there is a lot of young fellas actually that are so excited. They should be the last of their thoughts, but actually they're really thinking about it, and that's really gives me hope, because obviously the new generations are our hope, and if they're already thinking so early about this problem, it means that there's really hope for everybody. So that really makes me super excited. And
Can I add to that?
Sure.
We're seeing the same thing at A4LI. Well, there's a lot of young people who are super excited about this issue, and I think they should be excited about it because, everybody ages. So anyway, not to interrupt you, let me give you the time.
Yeah, free to interrupt people. It's definitely a very informal panel. You can just chime in here.
Yeah, and particularly, I'm obviously very biased, but also very excited about the idea of partial reprogramming, which is the work that I am doing academically and as an entrepreneur, which I truly believe is going to be one of the many things that actually are going to change the way we're thinking about aging and rejuvenation. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Right. I think the two biggest things that I see over the last 5 years is, first of all, it seems to be that longevity is now really starting to become mainstream. I don't think this is all good. I think if it moves too much into the aesthetics and wellness and so on side, which I feel like sometimes it does a bit, I think it should stay more on the biotech and trying to solve what was on the board here, like really not dying. And I think the second point that changed over the last 5 years, I think now it's potentially feasible that we're going to get significant support with AGI. Right. I think over the last 5 years, it might also kill us all, but if we're lucky, then some part or a good part might be supported by AGI. I'm still working on cryonics and human cryopreservation, because whatever happens with AI, I can't predict anything there, so I act as if, this wouldn't be a thing, at least not in what I'm personally doing. And the second reason why I work on that, I have a cryopreservation research institute in Switzerland and a company that offers that as a service, and a couple of other companies who do parts of it. Because I think there's unfortunately a pretty high risk that we're all going to be 85 at some point, lying there dying of cancer, and there's no good longevity and no good cryopreservation. Fingers crossed that that's not going to be the case, but I'm okay with being the backup.
Hey there, I'm Joe, and I think, let's see, a couple things. One, I've been in the longevity space for, I don't know, a dozen years now or something. And one of the things that started happening in the last few years is when I mentioned working on longevity biotechnology to people, various people, they don't go, huh? Or oh, really? Is that really a thing? It's a lot easier to have conversations now, which makes it a lot more fun as a space to work in. And I think it gives it a lot more momentum. The other thing is, I think within the last 5 years, the software has gotten a lot better. Like a few years earlier, I think one of the big changes, one of the big positive sort of secular changes in biology overall was starting to be able to do single cell studies rather than like looking at averages of tissues for gene expression, but you can look at the gene expression in individual cells and tissues, and largely created by a very aggressive private company named 10x that makes pretty good products, even if they're reasonably expensive. But nobody knew what to do with all that data. So people just published these pretty pictures, UMaps of all the cells in a particular tissue, and journals accepted that for a long time. But now there's really nice software for figuring out deep meaning of that data. And it continues to progress a lot. And I think that, and it's just like software generally in bio, which, software is now starting to be called AI, which is fine. But like, I don't know, maybe it was 10 years ago, I gave a TED talk on longevity biotechnology, and I was saying that biology is biotechnology is basically technology, and it's going to start hitching a ride on Moore's law, and that's happening now because like the microscope is a sequencer, and then that means all the data coming off of it is digital, which means it can now start following along the rest of the secular curve from like just Moore's law happening and accelerating everything, which is great because I want biology to accelerate because I want to be able to create cures for all the aging ailments for everybody as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'm Sam. Maybe just a talk from personal experience, because 5 years ago I was still in my PhD at MIT, and like when people talked about aging, it was like kind of funny. I mean, I don't know. It was like it was like not regarded as a real science, and so I think that and like thanks in part to like a lot of work that have been done by people on this panel. Like aging, longevity is like now actually regarded as a science by like a lot of the biology, biotechnology, bioengineering community, which is great. I think the other thing which hasn't come up so far is that like the regulators also are starting to like pay attention and figure it out. I mean, as we saw with Loyal, like a few weeks ago, they're starting now to create pathways for drugs that actually recognizing aging as something that a drug can affect, which is fantastic for the entire. I mean, like, that's like a critical thing that has to happen for the entire field. So I think those are really big things that have happened. Just on the point about the AGI coming to help and about what we're doing, I think that like the aging or longevity research today is still like really bottlenecked by basic science, right? So like there's still like really not a very good understanding of the fundamental mechanisms underlying longevity, and I run this new kind of like AI for science moonshot called Future House, which we announced about this time last month. We're trying to build an AI scientist with the thesis that as you said, maybe the AGI can come to help and help to speed up some of the basic research. So.
We do have a manifold question submitted by Yuri Dagan on like, will human intelligence solve aging before AGI does? So you guys can start voting on that one. We'll see, but the timelines are definitely related.
I think it will be a collaboration.
Okay. AI or AGI?
Maybe we'll end up depending on your definition of,
Yeah,
AGI,
well, we can wade all day into the definitions of AGI that people have these days.
And your definition of aging. So, like, since aging is multifactorial, not a thing, I am sure that these, the centaurs that basically are people working in biology today, like everybody's hopefully using things like ChatGPT 100 times a day in their work, like humans and AI are constantly working together now, and there are some pieces of aging that for sure we will solve that way. But there are probably, I'm surely more refractory ones that will have to wait for someone smarter.
Great. All right. Well, I want to get into some of the dicey and spicy parts now. For anyone who feels, let's say, outright enough, why did you give us one thing that you think is overvalued and one thing that is undervalued on this panel? And then I want you guys to discuss a little bit if you agree with that. So within longevity, what do you think is like one bit right now, ideally on the scientific and technical area, that you think is undervalued or overvalued? Feel free to disagree wildly with everyone.
So undervalued is research on aging. Actually, most researchers in the field, and I would say most companies in the field, they claim to work on aging and they don't. They work on age-related diseases. Whereas the biggest prize is actually to focus on aging itself. It's very difficult to do, but somehow we all start and then we fall into disease space. And medicine, that's how medicine works. And we could add, our contribution to this, which is fine. It's not bad, but we should really focus on the most important goal. That's what I think is undervalued, ultimately. Overvalued. Several things. I don't know which one to choose. I would say Synalytics. Overvalued a little bit. Yeah.
Overvalued. Do people agree here?
Well, I was about to use Synalytics as one of my part of the undervalued. One of the part of the undervalued. So, yeah, opinions differ. The unit of opinion in longevity is one person at the moment. So the undervalued is the last mile, I would say. We have things that could legitimately be described as rejuvenation therapies right now, one of which I would say is the dasatinib and quercetin combination. It does clear senescent cells in humans. That has been demonstrated. Yes, microphone, close to face. Okay, so, and the last mile, we have this thing. It's not being put into trials rapidly. It's very lackadaisical, very slow. There are no financial incentives. But nonetheless, we have a therapy that legitimately could help millions of people, A, not die, and B, not have such a terrible time of their late lives. But, it's nothing's happening. There's very little motivation to actually get that to where it needs to be. So I would call that undervalued. In terms of overvalued, I think I agree with Joe that somehow we've decided to call software AI. I'm not sure where that started happening, but it's just software. It's just a way to make computers do the boring processing lots of data stuff that computers are meant to do. Its role in the infrastructure of small molecule drug development is important, because if suddenly you can do something for $1 million rather than $10 million, great, 10 times as much small molecule drug developing is happening. But I think the hype cycle is what it is, and it is enormously overvalued. So I think that sets up a nice set of dichotomies for the rest of the panel.
Anyone want to agree, disagree, put something new on the map?
All right, well, Synalytics was on my mind too.
Undervalued or overvalued?
Well, maybe both, actually. There you go. There's a third opinion. It's the third way. I think the thing is that when things get hypey, they're always overvalued. So Synalytics was super hypey like a few years ago. Like everybody was doing Synalytics. It was going to be the answer to everything. And I kept looking for a Synalytics company to invest in, actually, and I couldn't find one that I thought was that I could, that I thought was going to work. And so I didn't invest. And I'm glad I didn't, because then it turns out we learned all this other stuff about how, Synalytics, might want cells around that are that we don't want to clear out because they help with healing and all of that. So yeah, so I think Synalytics, anything trendy gets really hyped. That gets really hyped up, I think, is overvalued. And maybe we see that a bit in the cellular reprogramming space right now. So we'll see what happens with that as it goes along. I mean, not to say it's got great potential, but I feel like it's really hypey right now.
Joe, chime in here.
Yeah, and Joe can. I think the work Joe is doing is great, and I'm definitely not saying you're overvalued, but
I'm saying that Joe is overvalued.
I'm saying that Joe is undervalued. No, I think that everything has pretty much everything follows this typical curve of I don't know if you've seen the Gartner hype cycle, but it's this graph that looks sort of like an underdamped feedback loop in control theory, where it like overshoots at the beginning, and then everybody's like, "Oh my God, this is going to solve everything." Like reprogramming is going to solve global warming, whatever. And then they inevitably a bunch of them go, "Oh, okay, well, it's not everything. Therefore, it's boring," and it falls back down at the bottom of the news cycle. But it turns out it's actually useful. It's just not everything. You can let go of your FOMO about it. People get FOMO really badly, super early on, and they want to grab onto the new thing. And then when they relax that, usually they take off on FOMO for something else, like Web3 or whatever.
AI.
Crypto, blah, blah. Now AI. So it falls down a bit, but it's actually useful. And then so the curve kind of dips down, and then it slowly creeps up toward the slow ramp of productivity or whatever they call it. That's where we are. It turns out that early on in the partial reprogramming world, there were like half a dozen people running around saying, "Wow, this is great. We're going to take Yamanaka factors, put them in a virus, and like infect every cell of the body, and just like transform and rejuvenate the whole person." Turns out that every tissue and every cell type is kind of different the way it relates to reprogramming, and some of them are more amenable to reprogramming, and they're just like shoot right up to pluripotency very quickly, and other ones are a little bit more entrenched in their identity, and they go slower. Different transcription factors for different tissues. So there's actual work there. And you have to focus on a tissue and get to know it and learn how to measure it and how to deliver to it. We're in the useful functional grind period now, and that's great. It's real work.
Okay, and let me just say what I think is undervalued, and then I'll pass this along. I think the thing that is undervalued for me, and I'm always looking for this, is I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. Like, why don't we automate labs? Why aren't all labs automated, right? Like, that's serious low-hanging fruit that's totally undervalued. So if anyone's working on that, come talk to me.
Do you want me to respond? Because I think lab automation is overvalued.
Yes.
This one I'll go down over. So lab automation today sucks. Like really, it's really, really, really bad. So okay, well, so maybe the concept. If we want to find like a middle ground, I think fights are more interesting. But if we want to find like a middle ground, yeah, like the concept of lab automation is maybe undervalued, but I think the actual automation, like automation today as a solution, is like super overvalued. There are just like so many things in every wet lab workflow basically that you just like cannot get robots to do out of the box. I mean, so that you can automate particular workflows, but it becomes like for each workflow you want to automate, it becomes a 6 to 12 month process. And like,
that's why scientists shouldn't be doing it themselves. There should be a company that does lab on.
But it's so much faster. But it's like, so the point is you have to get the assay to work first. You have an assay, right? You have to get it to work in your lab. And if you try to do that on a robot, it's going to take you like 5 years. If you do it with your own hands, it'll take you 1 year. But then once you've gotten it set up and you've gotten it to work, getting it to work on a robot, it's like another year, right?
The problem I see with researchers using outside companies is that partition is kind of hard to communicate across, and the protocols are very subtle. And so what I end up seeing created are these very brittle structures that take a long time to build. And then meanwhile, the research that was useful to be automated has moved on. And everybody's then like crestfallen, and the machine sits in the corner and doesn't get used, which is why at Retro, I have been, for the last 2 years, building up slowly an internal automation effort. I know it's not for every company, and I have the budget to do it and everything.
This is the crazy thing. Every scientist is building their own automation. What? This is not rocket science. It is not rocket science.
At some point, we'll start open sourcing it. We've already open sourced a bit of it, but
like we're in the 1950s. We're still pipetting. I mean, it's ridiculous.
There's one important point that makes automation hard, which is the nature of the beast regarding protocols in a wet lab. In theory, your automation, quote unquote, could be go ask a CRO to do it, right? But everybody who's worked in a wet lab, talking to a CRO, you know that if you're asking another company to do it, suddenly you've lost control over the horizontal and the vertical because you can't communicate the subtleties. It's very hard to do that. Fundamentally, lab automation is a very hard problem because protocols are insufficiently specified. Even replication between labs is very hard to do, primarily because protocols, it's almost impossible to sufficiently specify, everything that you need to do. So automation automatically in people's minds means, oh God, I'm working with a CRO, even if that CRO is a machine that you're glaring at because you don't have the switches that you want to have, that you would have with a human being doing the thing. And arguably, the industry has already automated all of the low-hanging fruit, and those things are called lab equipment, right? Like you have a thing that does your development of Western blots for you. You don't do that by hand anymore. So we can argue about this.
Yes, so this could go on forever. So,
okay, where do I start? So I strongly agree with Vadim when it comes to the fact that I think there is a strong dramatic undervalue when it comes to, for example, funding, academic funding to really understand aging. There is still a lot of boring, tedious work that needs to be done that is primarily descriptive, that is absolutely needed before we move anything, into kind of in the therapeutic space, in my opinion. And that's really a problem because this creates, well, first of all, because again, this creates a profound lack of resources for scientists and I think that science should be driving, all our decisions, very honestly. I speak as a scientist. And this creates a second problem, which is, a very, in my opinion, too fast switch into private capital. That obviously creates a lot of hype. It's a necessity. You need to create hype in order to get funding, right? But also creates a lot of potential problems down the road because if any of these things is going to fail, it's going to fail miserably and the whole field is going to be impacted by this failure. And I think that's a real problem that, could come at some point. The same things that happened with stem cells a while back. A lot of excitement, and then, here comes, the problems, because of course there's still a lot of work to be done scientifically, and it's a long-term shot. So, and which brings me to the second part, which is, well, anything there is a lot of things that is over kind of hyped, and anything that is not supported by strong scientific evidence, and there's plenty of examples out there. And so I would really hope for kind of a general, really position here where we really put science again as the priority, and anything that has strong scientific evidence should move forward. And there's also plenty of examples for that. To go back to what Joe was saying, I mean, there's a lot of people out there. I mean, I personally think the partial reprogramming is one. Again, it's not the solution, it's one of the solutions. But there is also, of course, there's still a lot of things that we need to understand. We are developing a lot of technologies in that regard. But there is also a lot of people that are also just giving crazy ideas, like using viral vectors for systemic rejuvenation, using the Yamanaka factor. That's completely crazy. And if people like those move ahead and show that then it's not safe, the whole field is going to be crippled. And that's a shame because it has a lot of potential. So again, I'm strongly opinionated on this because again, I'm personally touched by this, but I really strongly think that science should be the driving force of these efforts.
Right, real quick. I think if you're talking about research allocation, then all the approaches that where we need a deep degree of understanding of how aging and biology works are overvalued, right? And everything where and again, it's about research allocation. Everything that where you don't technically need to understand, like cryopreservation being one of those, of course, but then also replacement approaches like organ replacement and so on, whole body replacement approaches. I think they are, from a research allocation standpoint, significantly undervalued.
Well, at this panel, we can just barely scratch the surface, but that's what the speaker meet and greets afterwards are for. So I want you to give us one sentence, what you really want to talk about with people more in depth when they have time to talk to you for about 30 minutes or something after the next panel. Give us a sentence of what you really, really want to talk about. Can be something that you think is majorly undervalued in that space, an open challenge that you want people to solve, something that you currently want more help with, anything that you are really excited to talk about in the speaker meet and greet.
Yeah, there are many important problems as discussed here in the panel. Understanding aging is number one by far, I think. We really need to understand what we study and what is our enemy, and not focus on diseases, on lab automation or senolytics, whatever. It's just, is it like increased chance of dying, or is it loss of function, or is it damage accumulation? It really depends on like how we approach this whole problem. And we need to work together on this main problem and target aging itself, and not focus on smaller things.
Cool. I think like my topic would be the first 30 years of actually reversing atherosclerosis rather than just slowing it down, starting about 2 years ago when our program started. So leading to the idea that people in their 40s, every 5 years or so, they get a treatment and they never develop atherosclerosis. And as a result, human mortality is slashed by 25 to 40% starting about 20, 25 years from now.
Yeah, so I'm interested in talking to anyone who's got innovative ideas in the biotech space, which is, it's big, I'm interested in extending health span. I mean, I know a lot of people here might be interested in immortality. We didn't get to that topic, but yeah, I'm interested in health span, being healthier, and I agree that the parts replacement is definitely undervalued.
Yeah, I wanna follow up on that. I mean, can we stop having as the first question, like when are we going to live forever, or what do you think is going to be the maximum lifespan? That's BS. I'm sorry, again, sorry for being blunt. That's not what we care about. We care about extending the healthy lives of people. Period. Is that gonna come with an extension of lifespan? Sure, like anything else, like a vaccine, like the aspirin, like whatever you take every day. Of course, if you're gonna have healthier lives, you're gonna have longer lives. That's okay. The challenges of the future are gonna change as the society changes, and yeah, that's fine. I mean, if at some point we will be forced to colonize other planets, we will have to live longer. We will have to be immortal at some point, because otherwise there's no way for us to get to other planets, period. Whatever that's going to be. I mean, that's okay. Science is changing and we will change with that. Fine. Let's focus about safety and efficacy and what we can do today to affect the life of people that are in need for these, solutions. That's my position.
Right. Happy to talk with anybody who is interested in working in the field of longevity as a whole, or of course cryopreservation. Not only working, but also investing. More money is needed here.
What would I like to talk about? I have a strong action bias. That's why I like companies. I like teams working together on very specific goals, going fast, iterating, and still doing good science. We've done over 800 experiments now over the last little over 2 years at Retro. So what would I like to talk to people who are also have a strong action bias and want to participate. So if you are or know like superb computational biologists and want to be part of Retro, incredible wet lab biologists. If you're super into autophagy, if you like leading projects, working on projects. If you're into like software and biology and machines and you want to come help us with lab automation, all that kind of thing, that I'll just talk to you all day long. So come hit me up.
Well, it's good that we even have 2 days of this.
I'm interested to talk to anyone who wants to figure out how we can use AI to accelerate the pace of basic discovery research, and kind of more generally, just like how we accelerate, how we accelerate the pace of discovery in biology, because I think that's probably the fundamental bottleneck at the moment for longevity and for everything else that we want out of biology. So.
Cool. Well, before we head on to the next panel, I do want to go through a few of the manifold markets. I'm not sure of how many of you have already predicted. The first one hits really with Vittorio's points of like, will one person currently alive reach longevity escape velocity? Currently, it's at 66%, so we'll see. Next one up is, will the first person have been successfully arrived from Cryonics by? And currently, 49%, the biggest amount, think 2080, but like anything below that goes to, and 5% think it could already be by 2030. So I guess AI timelines are also important for that one. Next one up. What is, if you're in favor of indefinite life extension, which not everyone on this panel is, what are the biggest myths to bust for skeptic? And most people think here it's that indefinite life extension would make life boring and meaningless. Obviously, there's not just one myth to bust, but several different ones. This one, which intervention will add the most years of life to healthy people in 5 years of research? That was taken from the longevity biotech bottleneck analysis. And Senolytics is coming up high here, so maybe you have some more myths to bust there, or you guys do. And last but not least, which of these non-technical barriers to longevity progress are most urgent to address? Regulatory FDA progress. Aim into that, and tomorrow in the Realpolitik discussion, we'll talk a lot more about these non-technical areas. For now, I really, really want to thank you both, all of you guys, 7 people, so much for joining the biggest panel of today. Thank you so much.